and click on Book TV.
Next, we take you inside the Nation of Islam with author Vibert White as he details the internal workings of the organization under the leadership of Louis Farrakhan. Mr. White examines the evolution of Islam's ideology and chronicles his own sojourn during the 1980s and 1990s as a registered Muslim, from his days as a foot soldier in the Fruit of Islam, the nation's military organization, through his rise to the status of minister and advisor to the leadership. It's about 50 minutes.
You are somebody. I failed to introduce myself. I'm sorry. I'm Adrienne Bailey, the Student Government Association President for the 2001-2002 school year. Thank you. I would now like to turn our attention to our visitor. Dr. Vibert L. White has returned to Wildcat Country. A 1998 graduate of Bethune-Cookman College, Professor White has truly lived up to the legacy of Dr. Mary McLeod Bethune. In addition to having several articles published in various historical journals, he has had the honor of serving as the curator of a host of institutions, some that include the National African American Museum and the Arts Consortium Museum of African American Research. He is the project director for the University of Illinois and the New Philadelphia Project, which focuses on the restructuring of the first Black incorporated town in the United States, which is named the New Philadelphia, Illinois. Professor White has affiliations with both national and international agencies, as in 1996 he was appointed to both the White House Commission on Travel and Tourism and the Ohio State Commission on Tourism and Travel. Today, Professor White returns to the Wildcat family to present his recent publication, Inside the Nation of Islam, a historical and personal testimony of a Black Muslim. This book offers a deeper look into the formation and development of the Nation of Islam. Wildcats, please join me in welcoming Professor Vibert L. White home.
Thank you very much. It feels good to be home at Bethune-Cookman College. Professor Bronson, I think you sound stronger today than you sounded 20 years ago. I thank you. And Professor Bronson is absolutely correct. Bethune-Cookman College is a place that builds leadership. It's a place that incorporates one's mind and one's body and spirit to do the best of their potential, to become strong. I remember several years ago when I entered into the gates of Bethune-Cookman College, I was a sight to behold. I had a gold tooth, smack in the middle. My hair was wild, crazy. I called it braided, but it was strange. And I knew that I looked strange and I sounded sometimes even stranger. But professors and leaders like Dr. Bronson looked at me and they saw something within me. They looked at my potential and they molded something. Even though I thought I was a rebel or a revolutionary or some type of counterculturalist on campus, they said to themselves that that boy is going to become somebody. And I'm glad that you did, because Bethune-Cookman College was my foundation. When I left, I went to Purdue. I was ready for Purdue. The Boilermakers couldn't tell me a thing. And when I left Purdue, I went to Ohio State, where I finished my PhD in history in 4 years because of Bethune-Cookman College. So again, you must give your school another round of applause. I've been trying to get back to this great school for some time. I always wanted to talk to my friends, my family, the people who molded me. And I'm thankful to Mrs. Graham and her staff, the administration, and affording me the opportunity to come before you and to speak about some of the things that are important to this day and period and time that we're living in. As you know, the title of my book is called Inside the Nation of Islam, a historical and personal testimony by a black Muslim. And it's about my history, my struggle, my movement within the organization, and how I rose through the ranks of that organization to become a minister and advisor to the leadership. And ultimately, my travels through the group until I decided to leave the organization. How did it all begin? Why did it begin? In the late 1970s, I was one of thousands, perhaps millions, of African Americans who longed for a leader like Malcolm X. Like you, I read the autobiography of Malcolm X. I read his speeches. I reviewed his lectures and followed his ideas of black nationalism. I was hungry for a new type of black leadership. I believed at that time in the early or the late 1970s in the concept of fighting for freedom and justice and fighting against the ills of racism that had plagued our society. So in my mind, with the void of leadership that was based on the deaths of Malcolm X, Martin Luther King, Fred Hampton of the Black Panther Party, and scores of other black activists, I was well suited to hear the words of Louis Farrakhan, who sounded like the rebirth, the new Malcolm X. Farrakhan at the time was the national spokesperson for the Most Honorable Elijah Muhammad of the Nation of Islam. And he was rebuilding a movement, a concept that rested on, again, black nationalism, self-help principles, and race unity. I like these ideas. These were tasty words from my mouth. Living in a Caribbean and Central American home, I was reared with a steady dose of race pride and solidarity and courage and a passion for leadership. My parents read stories to me about such great leaders like Toussaint Louverture of Haiti, Nat Turner, and Booker T. Washington. In fact, before the age of 10, I knew a great deal about the black histories in Costa Rica, Panama, Haiti, Jamaica, and of course the United States. You see, again, at that time, in the late 1970s, I was ready to hear a new voice, a speech, a concept that talked about radical black thought and black nationalism, things that seemed to be the greatness and the need for the race. Another issue that caused me to gravitate towards the nation was the seemingly open hostility of white America towards the black underclass. For instance, at this time, there was new discussions about reverse discrimination. It was new at the time, reverse discrimination. And it seemed as if there was an attack on affirmative action, because at this time, again, we as black Americans were talking about moving into the mainstream of American society, of American life, of the political and economic structure of our society. But it seemed to be a backlash in the late 1970s with this. In reference to law cases, for instance, there was a great deal of discussion about Dufonis, the Weber case, as well as the Bakke case. Even in this very chapel, there were great discussions and arguments about what was going on in black America and affirmative action. I saw it as a backlash by whites to black America. A view that suggested that white America was tired of the civil rights movement. An idea that white America was saying, now, black people, you're on your own. You can do what you will because you have millionaires, you have people in corporate America. To me, it was a backlash. The idea coming from white America was, black people, stop the complaining. Stop the belly aching about the evils of white society. I couldn't understand this at the time, because at this very same time while this thought was going on, there was a great deal of violence that was taking place in our society. As some of you can remember, well, none of you weren't even a thought at the time. But some people that was in my class and professors can remember that at this time in the late 70s and early 80s, there was a great deal of violence, racial violence in places like Miami, Tampa, Jacksonville, Atlanta, scores of activities. There was the rebirth of the KKK and the growth and development of a new group that we called the skinheads. There was hostility, anger, violence, bloodshed against black America. So I was ready to hear the sweet words of Louis Farrakhan at that time. Farrakhan hit the lecture circuit like a new and better Malcolm X. He was fiery. He spoke about the evils of America, the greatness of the black community, the need for an Islamic nation in the United States. He sounded like the real deal. I heard his first lecture right in this chapel. He was invited by one of the professors in history at the time, I think, by the name of Bruce Cosby. And that's what I needed. Sounded great. So I started to read the books, read the books about the Honorable Elijah Muhammad, such books as Message to the Black Man, Our Savior Has Arrived, How to Eat to Live, Volumes 1 and 2, The Fall of America, and several other manuscripts and articles. I read more about black culture and society. I read things about class and gender and Marxist and Maoist thought. These things were liberating thoughts to my mind because I wanted to learn, I wanted to understand, I wanted to liberate the black race. I had a passion for our society. I followed this course. It should also be mentioned that by my senior year, I was reading, not only reading, but I was walking and talking and dressing sometimes like a Muslim. Bow tie. The only thing I didn't have at the time was a bean pie and a final call with me. But everything else, I was following that trend. And it's also interesting to note, before I go on, is that, this college, even though this college is a United Methodist institution, it gave me the opportunity to explore my religious, my social, my political growth. It gave me that opportunity. It didn't have to, but it did. My activities at Bethune-Cookman College, in reference to the Nation of Islam, were part of a larger and a longer journey for self-understanding. It must be understood that college and university experience is a time to grow and to explore academic fields, but it is also a period to develop one's maturity and consciousness in every area of their life. For instance, as I stated, I played with the ideas of communism, Maoism, political democracy, and capitalist ideas. I explored and questioned Christianity, Islam, Judaism, and spiritual belief systems that are practiced in Africa, Asia, Latin America, and the Caribbean. Yes, in some ways I was confused, but I was always on the right track. Thus, I studied not just the assignments that were presented to me by such great professors like Dr. Taylor, Dr. Childs, and Dr. Wiley, but materials that I searched and found that could better my life. You see, I was not just concerned about grades, but about thought, intellect, and substance. In 1980, I graduated from Bethune-Cookman and entered the great halls of Purdue University. I believe that I was the first graduate of Bethune-Cookman College to earn a fellowship at Purdue University, I believe. Entering into Purdue was a strange event for me. My 4 years at BCC was radically different than the environment in West Lafayette, Indiana. How? First, I left a small black liberal arts institution to attend a major Big Ten university that was known globally for its research and engineering. My colleagues, primarily at Bethune, were American blacks with a sprinkle of Hispanics, a dash of Persians, and another dash of West Indians. At Purdue, every race, nationality, political thought, and religion was represented. Lastly, I was engaged in discourse with brilliant people who had graduated from such institutions like Brown University, Harvard, Columbia, Ohio State, Stanford. Indeed, I was shocked, impressed, and at first scared. But in a few weeks, I came to understand that at Purdue, I was as smart as all my other peers, or they were just as dumb as me. I believe in the former. At Purdue, I finished with outstanding records. My time at Purdue brought me closer to the small but growing nation of Islam and its leadership, Louis Farrakhan. On occasional weekends, I journeyed to Chicago from Lafayette, which is only about 2 hours away, to study under the tutelage of Louis Farrakhan and several of his associates. It felt as if I was speaking to a disciple of God. Other occasions, I participated with activities with the Muslim community in Indianapolis, Indiana, a smaller but a homely group. My story is this. My story is the journey of 15 years within the Nation of Islam, a 15-year period that I was able to critique and analyze not only an organization that stated it represented the best interests of the black community, but also a leader who argued and maintained that they were concerned about the needs, the feel, and the aspiration of black America. This is my story. Now the question comes in. Why did I write the book? Why did I write Inside the Nation of Islam? First of all, when I started to write the book, it was more for a therapeutic reason. I had collected over 15 years of diary writing, journal writing. I just started to write and to record what took place in my years. Then secondly, as I started to write even more, I started to question what was the meaning and what is the meaning of the Nation of Islam, and what should it mean to black America? You see, what was happening is that in the 1980s now, as a minister of the organization, the Nation of Islam had taken on a pattern of what I consider highlighting controversy, exploiting working class people and the black underclass for the leader's own political gain. I had to write this story. Now, I wrote this story at a time when the Nation of Islam was at the height of its strength. You know, sometimes we as scholars like to write materials about a man or a woman or organization long after the organization or the man or woman has died. It's easy to do that. One of the things that I learned at Bethune-Cookman College was to have courage at all times. I wrote the manuscript when the Nation of Islam was at the pinnacle of its strength. In spite of people who said to me that, listen, Professor White, you're putting your life on the line for writing such a manuscript. Even though people said to me that I had no business to write about a black leader who is especially trying to do good for black America, I questioned that because of my understanding of history and the structure of black America is that we must follow the discourse and the line of people like W.E.B. Du Bois, Booker T. Washington, Marcus Garvey, Malcolm X, and all these other great men and women who put themselves on the line for truth. And you, my friends, if you cannot write the truth and state the truth at the time that is going on, then you're not a scholar, you're not an activist, you're not even a student. In fact, what you will be a parasite. In fact, there's a person by the name of Charles Hamilton Houston, who was the dean of the Howard University Law School, who educated Thurgood Marshall and others, who ultimately eradicated Plessy versus Ferguson with the Brown case in 1954, who stated that you're either a social engineer or you are a parasite on society. This is what I wasn't going to be. I was going to be a fighter for justice in spite of what people had said or in spite of the fact that my life could be on the line. This is why I wrote the book. The second reason why I wrote the book is because the Nation of Islam and groups like this have a way oftentimes of using charisma to attract young people like yourself. You need to be given a fair chance, and everyone else, to read manuscript and to critique the organization for what it is. That's why I wrote the manuscript. Now, what about the Nation of Islam and its political and religious concept? What does it mean? In a time that we're living in now that is highly complex, at a time when there's a war that is going on, we must understand the relationship between extremist groups in the United States and extremist groups in the Middle East. What do you mean by this? One, are any of you familiar with the fact that in the last 5 months, some militant Aryan groups in the United States have met with extremist groups in places like Lebanon? No, the media is not saying this at all. These types of things has been going on for a long time. How about the Nation of Islam? The Nation of Islam in the last 5 to 10 years have also met with these types of groups overseas. People like Mr. Gaddafi and Arafat and several others, Hussein, who have a relationship and see the need for the destruction and the fight against American society. The Nation of Islam and other groups must be critiqued and reviewed in this manner. One of the last things I'm going to make mention of before we do question and answer is that what does the Nation of Islam, terrorism, mean to Black America? It means simple this. One, we have to critique, review, and analyze. We must discuss the course of where we're going to go and what we're going to do. We have to understand who are the people who say they represent us and question them into the manner, are they leading us into the right direction? I'm going to stop at this time. It's getting hot up here. I mean, these heat, this light or something on me. Okay, to open up for questions and answers.
I'd like to know, what are your views on the late Khalid Muhammad, if you have any?
Yes, I do. Khalid Muhammad, question is what are my views on the late Khalid Muhammad? I knew Khalid Muhammad very, very well. Khalid Muhammad for some of you who do not know, was the former spokesperson for Louis Farrakhan and the Nation of Islam. Then when he died, he was the spokesperson for the new Black Panther Party. Khalid Muhammad was an interesting person who was titled as the fire mouth or the firebrand leader within the Nation of Islam. He was the one who could threaten people and scare people. The thing about Khalid Muhammad and Louis Farrakhan is that, one, I think it was in 1994 or so, he gave a lecture at King's College in New Jersey. And in this lecture, he stated, well, he voiced the most anti-Semitic, the most anti-white, the most anti-Catholic polemics I've ever heard in my life, saying that all whites in South Africa should be killed, even if they have died, to shoot them again. Stated that white babies should be killed. He just went off. And Khalid Muhammad represented a pattern within the Nation of Islam that liked to highlight controversy, liked to attack people because it brought money and interest. For instance, in the late 1980s, in the middle 1980s and the 1990s, the Nation of Islam could go into any city in the United States, and all we had to say at the time was the white man was the devil, and that the white man should be destroyed, and that white society is going to come and was going to come to an end, and black society was going to be the pinnacle of a new world. This drew in every city in the mid-1980s and 1990s, hundreds of thousands of people to our lectures, packing such places like the Atlanta Dome with 65,000 people and so forth. So, in reference to Khalid Muhammad was a person who got excited, in my estimation, by his own polemics. He liked the idea of warring. And he was doing no more than following the course of the Nation of Islam, selling wolfing tickets. The sad thing about him, along with this, is that when he was kicked out of the Nation of Islam, I thought it was quite strange, because the Nation of Islam was voicing the same type of rhetoric, in my estimation. So Khalid Muhammad, he just recently died, and he had a lot of potential, but I think he wasted his potential. He could have been one of the greatest black leaders of our age, in my estimation. Another question? Yes. Stand up.
How are we supposed to find out what isn't in the media?
What is in the media?
Yeah, because you said there are things that the media is not showing us.
Well, as college students, I think you have everything at your disposal to find the truth. I mean, I would assume that 98 of you have computers in your dormitories. And most of you the university is connected to the web. You can find a tremendous amount of information through those sources. Secondly, you should begin to contact the State Department if you really want to know about issues taking place internationally. Contact the State Department and ask them basic questions. One, we're fighting this tremendous war in Afghanistan. Why isn't it we don't hear anything from Kuwait? We defended Kuwait. Our soldiers died for Kuwait. Why is it they're not on the front line? Why is it Saudi Arabia hasn't frozen the assets of bin Laden? Why is it countries like Egypt still haven't given their word that they're going to send hardware or military support in this engagement? You must ask the hard questions because no one else is, and especially as African American students. You must critique what has taken place very, very carefully. Because if we're talking about a long-standing conflict, it means two things. One, It means that perhaps 3, 4 years, maybe even sooner, some of you may be drafted. And ladies, you're not going to be excluded this time if that is the case. So you have to look at these issues, and you must ask the very, very difficult question. Don't be afraid. You can also contact the embassies of Kuwait, of Saudi Arabia, of several of these countries that still have missions in Washington, and if they don't, they have missions in Canada and Mexico. It's easy to do. Yes, ma'am.
To the conclusions that you came to, and was there some pivotal point where you said no, enough, and how did you tell the leadership of the nation?
Very good question. By the late even before, by 1986, I started to ask very difficult questions to Louis Farrakhan and his top laboring committee. And my first question was, why are we attacking Jewish members so harshly? It's no need to do this. We have a tremendous record of black solidarity and black nationalism. We can build things. You don't need to attack anyone. And the response from that was a silent, no, we're not going to stop. Because it was monetarily great for the organization. And plus, people enjoy seeing Minister Farrakhan and other top leaders walking on stage, showing off, looking pretty. It was a movie, it was theatrics. They like seeing this. So I started asking questions back then. Why I stayed in so long? Because I believed in a concept that is called boring from within. And that is working within an organization thinking that you can transform the group. I came to terms that I could not transform the group. And not only me, but several other people. For example, the person who wrote the foreword of my book, my friend, Michael Wallace of 60 Minutes. In the midst of all of this, he was still trying to bring Minister Farrakhan and the Nation of Islam along, trying to make them more moderate, trying to establish relationships with legitimate Jewish leaders in the United States so that Farrakhan could perhaps become a responsible leader. But in spite of all those dealings and trying, the Nation of Islam continued to voice a polemical style of hostility and anti-racial and national rhetoric. So by 1990, I said, well, I have to make a way out. And by 1995, I did. The reason why I stood to 1995 is because I thought that perhaps the Million Man March could change things. And in my estimation, I was fooled. It did not. Yes, sir. Very, very good and very interesting question. And that is, what happened to the money? Everybody wants to know. Well, the Nation of Islam collected millions of dollars in this campaign. At the time, the Nation of Islam was in a tremendous amount of debt. It was being sued from all angles because many legitimate black and white entrepreneurs and contractors had built several structures for the organization. They were not being paid. But the money did not go to that. We thought it was. The money went to the construction of much of it went to the construction of private home ownership. One of them was a tremendous mansion that was built in New Buffalo, Indiana. This place was one of the residents of Louis Farrakhan. Had a mansion, 2 or 3 smaller houses, a heliport, 2 or 3 tennis courts, Olympic-sized pool, and so on. This is where the money was going, to those types of structures and to the pocketbooks of many people. If you want to see the money again, that oftentimes when Minister Farrakhan would travel, he would travel overseas with about 25 to 50 people. all right? Stay in the best hotels. As you would say, living large, all right? So much of the money sadly went into the pockets of individuals, sadly. And that's a sad and that's a terrible thing to have occurred, because African American people, well, it takes black people a long time to give money. We know how we are. All right? And secondly, when we do give money, we want to see something from that money. You know, we get very upset when we go to church and we give a few dollars and see no structure, but the minister is living like a king. All right? But on another line to this, when we give money to an organization that says that it is going to help us, we really believe it, because the money is not just coming from young people. It's coming from your mother who may be 60 or 70. It can be part of her money to use to buy her next medicine, but she used that money for this. It may come from your sister who's on a strict wage. It may come from her. So when we give, we want to see something from it. And if it's nothing, if we don't see anything from it, what happens? When the next person come along who says that I have an idea and that I know the way to go, we don't give nothing, because we say, you fooled us once, you're not going to fool us twice. That's the sad thing. But I would encourage you to read the manuscript. I have a whole chapter that deals just with that. Yes.
How can African Americans be labeled as anti-Semitic? That's question number one. Not to defend the Honorable Mr. Farrakhan in any manner, but I don't believe, and I have seen the mansion, I don't believe that he lives any larger than the Grand Dragon of the Ku Klux Klan or other Americans that are polling in monies from our mothers or our grandmothers for medications, etc. So I don't believe that he's living any larger than anyone else who's in a position of power. Can you explain that to us?
Yes. Anti-Semitic, when we talk about anti-Semitic, very good question. The madam asked, how can Minister Farrakhan or anyone else be considered anti-Semitic? And how is he living different than any other leader in the United States? First of all, when we talk about anti-Semitic at this line, surely we're speaking of the Jewish community, even though it may be a term that is overused, because we're all Semitic people if you're non-white. So you make a very good point. But politically, we're talking about issues of the Jewish American community, because at this time, in the 1980s, there was from the Nation of Islam, from my camp at the time, there was an aggressive hostility to draw and to wage a conflict. Even though we argued that they started it, we continued it. For example, the publishing of such books like The Secret Relationship Between Blacks and Jews. Well, I don't know if any of you have read the manuscript, but that manuscript is not historical work. It's not good history. It is not true. All right? But passing this off in a way that, oh my God, saying that the problem of Black America are Jews, that is not accurate. The problem of Black America is white supremacy. All right? That is what has exploited and hurt and distracted and kept us in a negative position, not Jewish Americans. All right? Surely some of them may have played a role in this, but not them as a group. That's why I mentioned politically anti-Semitism. Secondly, about mansions. I'm not talking about one mansion. No. I am speaking of mansions that you have in Mexico, mansions that you have in Phoenix, mansions that you have two in Chicago. All right? We're also talking about mansions that's in Indiana. We're talking about a new facility that has taken place in Trinidad and Tobago. all right? You know, so these are things that should be understood. And thirdly, I am not interested in how the wizard of the KKK lives. That is not my argument, because my money is not going to go to him. All right? If he wants to live anyway, that's his business, and I would try to destroy his house. All right? You know, so we must get to the point, all of us. If it's a leader like a Jesse, or a leader like a Al Sharpton, or Louis Farrakhan, if it's a professor as myself, if it's a president like Dr. Bronson, or anyone in leadership in Black America, we must hold them responsible at all means. And we must not be afraid to say, listen, Vibert, you're wrong. I'm going to critique this. And if I have sense, I would go back and look at my documentation, review myself, and if I'm wrong, I would say, you're right. I will come along. Because the issue is not one person or two. The issue is the survival and the production and the future rise of Black America. Now, yes. I think this young lady behind you, then. I'll get you, Professor, but the young lady
Good morning. Okay, I recognize that Black America has residuals of the Ma'afa, and my concern is that you've been through your critique, your review, and your analysis of the Nation of Islam, and you stated that it was the ideas and the principles and the uplifting of Black America that drew you to the Nation of Islam.
Yes.
And now that you have, you know, brought your analysis of this, how do you propose that we uplift and unite Black America? I just want to get away from kind of pointing a finger and moving on and progressing, even though we have to recognize certain issues. But what do you propose, or how do you propose we uplift and unite Black America after seeing what you've seen?
First of all, the question is, how should we propose and uplift Black America and make us stronger to work together? First of all, I believe that we must stay the course, because Black America is perhaps one of the most unified Black groups and ethnic groups in the world. We haven't become the most affluent Black community in the world because we are separated all the time. We haven't become the most educated Black community in the world because we're separated all the time. It's easy to say that we're not separated, but look at the points where we are together. We have political influence. We have corporate influence. We have strength. Yes, we holler and fight like dogs among ourselves because we're family. And we must have a discourse. All right? Not all of us are going to believe the same thing, but we must argue and fight so that we can have an agenda, and we do have an agenda. And that agenda is making the American Constitution live up to its promises. That agenda is wiping out discrimination, poverty, exploitation, hunger, not only among Black Americans, but among Latinos, but among Asians, among every group that sits, that lives, that stands in this country. And on a larger front, we have an agenda to liberate the world because we are the light of the world. What do you mean by that? I've been to several countries, all through Europe, Africa, South America, all over. And everywhere that I go to, the question comes up, what are the African American people doing? Because they want to follow your course. Sometimes they follow things that we do stupid. Like when I was in Senegal once, I saw a guy trying to act like Flavor Flav, a Public Enemy. You know, some buffoon acting guy. All right? But on a very real tip, they follow us. Right now in Brazil, a country that has more blacks than the United States, a country that imported 5 million Black people during the slave trade as compared to only 500,000 coming to the United States. But that country is following our discourse. They're developing a black consciousness. They're developing a civil rights movement. They're becoming strong and vibrant. Why? Because they're looking at you. So don't get fooled into this rhetoric that, oh, we're all separated and we're not working together. That is something that people want to play on us. Because if you believe it long enough, you're going to act like it. If you weren't all together, if you weren't working together, there would not be a Bethune-Cookman College and you would not be here. Wrong. So, stay the course. Yes, ma'am. Now, Professor.
Thank you. First, I don't know how many of you know that there are 22.5 million blacks in America. So when you talk about getting together and keeping us together, we are together by virtues of skin color, if nothing else. Number two, I'd like for you to tell us about some of the good things you believe Mr. Farrakhan did during the time you knew him.
All right. Well, I think one of the things that he has done tremendously, he has helped to reform many blacks in the prison system. I mean, many blacks who unfortunately, and just don't laugh at them because sadly, many of us in this room may one day, by crook and hook, be put in a place that we should not be in. Many of our people who are there because they don't have proper representation, because they don't have the money, all right? And they have been ushered in some quarters in this country that is still very, very racist. But he has been able to reform many of these men, and reforming them by how? One, teaching them how to be moral. You see, one thing about leadership is that we, the people in leadership, must have a moral consciousness. We have to be better than good. We have to be excellent. And we have to live up to it, and we cannot say, well, other people do this. So he's teaching people there how to be moral, how to work hard. This is very important, how to work hard. What do you mean working hard? Working hard means when there looks as if there is no way out of a situation, you stay the course, you sweat, you strive, you hold on to that gut feeling, that spirit of God that I'm going to make a way out of no way. Because many of our people still do not know how to work hard. I mean, I have students, and I know none of you like this, all right, that you know, they have a difficult assignment. And as soon as, before even trying to look or study or review, they're coming to me, Dr. White, I cannot do it. What have you done? Nothing. You see? We have to do better than this. We have to work hard and teach our people how to work hard. On another thing, is that he tried to teach young men and women how to respect each other. And that's what we don't have, again, among our families. We need more respect among each other. Husband and wife, boyfriend and girlfriend, sister and brother. All right? Respect, love. And respect, my friends, is not the case whereby, I know you have a big game tomorrow, and you see a new man, and you say, oh my God, he's so handsome, he's so fine, I want him. All right? And the same with the woman, respect is more the case whereby I would like to know you for what's in here, what's in there, all right? Where are you taking me? Respect, you know. And I tell you, you know, for some of the sisters, some sisters do, and brothers do silly things. And we have to learn how to date in reference to respect. For example, if you date somebody, you say, I'm going with so-and-so, you should be asking yourself, where are you going? You may be going straight to hell, you know? So you should be asking, where are you going? All right, and what is taking place? Any others?
Yep.
Let me get someone else. Who? I'm sorry.
I'm sorry. I just came to ask, in your own opinion, is Islam as it's practiced today, is it compatible with a democracy in the countries which is practiced? Because in my opinion, is like Turkey is the only country that is kind of democratic plus Islamic, and the other countries are comfortable with dictators and all that. In your opinion, how do you look at it?
I tell you. First of all, when we talk about Islam, we're talking about several groups of Islamic society. We're talking about the Sunni Islamic community that is prevalent in such places like Saudi Arabia, and a majority of Muslims in the United States are Sunni. They practice the Sunnah, the words and the true path of the Quran. Then you have another branch called Shiite, which are practiced more so by the Persian Muslims, like in Iran, and a more radical stream. Then you have the Sufis that are more mystic, which is oftentimes practiced in places like Afghanistan and Pakistan, as well as West Africa. All right? So there's a wide array of Islam. Now, Islam in many of these countries do not practice democracy because they're headed by corrupt monarchs. And sadly, if it wasn't for the United States, many of these monarchs, like in Saudi Arabia and Kuwait, would not be in power. But there is some signs that democracy can come up in Islamic countries. For example, Senegal. You know, it has problems, but it has worked to develop an Islamic state, that is based on democracy. Ghana, even though Ghana is not a, quote, a Muslim community, but it has a tremendous amount of Muslims. And the leadership there is trying to work and develop a democratic community. Islam does not have to be at variance with democracy. But what you have oftentimes is not Islam, but you have culturalism that takes the place of Islam. For example, in Saudi Arabia, how can you have that state should not be called an Islamic state when 80% of the wealth is in the hands of 22% of the population. All right? We think of Saudi Arabia as this great oil place. The majority of the people there make less than $2 a day. We don't talk about that. And we don't talk about the fact that Kuwait, a country, again, that we defended, is a wealthy state that whereby the poor are exploited. In fact, about it, we have evidence that Kuwait imports some of its workers from the Sudan, a place that is going through right now a civil war and a country that is practicing slavery on its own citizens. Are we teaching this on this campus? All right? And many of these black slaves from that country are working in states like Kuwait as, quote, slaves. Not a mumbling word about this. I'm so sorry.
No. Join me in expressing our gratitude to this Bethune-Cookman College graduate. Thank you very much. I'm sure you've been enlightened. Thank you.
Vibert White is a professor of African American Studies at the University of Illinois at Springfield. His book, Inside the Nation of Islam, is published by University Press of Florida. For more information, visit their website, upf.com.